Hi, my name is Tana Mitchell, and I am here to talk about the book I chose for my biology class. I choose Beyond the Body Farm. A legendary bone detective explores murders, mysteries, and the revolution in forensic science. This book was written by Dr. Bill Bass and his associate John Jefferson. Dr. Bass is a world-renowned forensic anthropologist who founded the University of Tennessee research program called the Body Farm. The Body Farm is a research facility that is used for studying human decomposition in a manner of different ways. Dr. Bass receives most of the credit for this book due to his extensive forensic anthropology research. John Jefferson is also a well-known veteran journalist, science writer, and documentary filmmaker. Together, Bass and Jefferson wrote not only this book but also a series of books called the Body Farm novels. Dr. Bass and John Jefferson wrote Beyond the Body Farm in 2007. The book is dedicated to Dr. Wilton Krogman and Dr. Charlie Snow, who were forensic anthropologists and teachers that helped to pave the way for forensic revolution. Beyond the Body Farm is a fictional compilation of forensic cases Dr. Bass and John Jefferson worked on throughout their career with a detailed explanation of each case, method of forensics used, and turnout of each case. Dr. Bass's forensic research allowed him and his colleagues to be able to revolutionize the forensic world to help solve homicide cases, cold cases, and mistaken identity cases on a worldwide basis. Putting bodies back together after explosions, exhuming bodies for DNA samples, digging teeth out of burnt cars, and observing stages of fly larva development and bones are some of the daily tasks involved with Bill Bass's career. Bass sticks with his opinion that the generation of CSI viewers normally expect results for DNA testing in a few hours, but insists the truth is that the actuality can be months of research to come up with provable results. Be prepared for some great stories and lots of maggots and gore when reading this book. I chose this book due to when I read the back cover, the topic of forensics caught my eye. Forensics has always been of interest to me, so this was another aspect that I felt I could jump into and be able to enjoy. I want to delve into just a couple of the cases in the book to give you a detailed look at what the forensic world is all about. The first case is the bait/fireworks farm in Webb City, Tennessee on May 27, 1983, and the explosion that happened, killing 11 people and wounding one other. This was the largest illegal fireworks operation in the history of the United States. Turns out Dan Lee Webb, the owner, wasn't running just a bait cultivating farm, but was making illegal fireworks as well. Killed in the explosion were his mother, sister, brother, uncle, and several friends. Dan's wife ran away when the explosion happened, and Dan himself was away at a meeting in New York. The blast was heard 20 miles away and created a mushroom cloud 6 stories high. The explosion was caused by a faulty drill along with illegal fireworks and 6 barrels of highly explosive chemicals stored in a trailer. There had also been several smaller explosions at the location over the months previous to this event. This explosion scattered body parts such as heads, legs, arms, hands, feet, and torsos across a wide area of the farm. Many of the bodies were so terribly burned and decimated that they were unidentifiable. Dr. Bass's role in this explosion was to help piece the bodies back together to help identify each person. Dr. Bass and his team had to separate the legs by shaved and unshaven, left and right, break in bone, or length and girth of the leg. They paired the torsos by comparing male to female and had little luck in being able to match all of the fingers and ears that were found. The bodies were sorted and stored in refrigerated trailers. Now keep in mind, if an explosion of this nature were to happen today, it wouldn't be the Tennessee Emergency Management Association or 9 counties of emergency personnel responding with a couple of anthropologists. It would be DMORT from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. The Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team would arrive with anthropologists, portable morgues, dentists, embalmers, DNA technicians, and pathologists. The second case I wanted to touch base on is that of Leoma Patterson. Dr. Bass received a call from a former UT graduate named Michelle requesting his help in answering a long-standing question in her family about her grandmother. The grandmother had disappeared and then was found murdered 25 years before. She was found along the shores of Norris Lake, and the animals had gotten to her corpse beforehand. What remained of her was very little to nothing. The determination made was tentatively that it was Leoma Patterson. However, there was doubt in the family's mind that it was her due to the fact that there were no hands found on the corpse, no fingerprints on record, and no dental or medical x-rays to compare the remains to. The case was unsolved, and Leoma's remains were not buried until 5 years later, when her nephew confessed to fighting with her over a drug deal and hitting her in the head with a tire iron. 6 years after that, he recanted his statement and said he did not kill her. Leoma's children were never convinced completely the body that was thought to have been their mother's was actually her. When the granddaughter made the call to Dr. Bass to help answer the family's questions, he agreed to help exhume the body, do a skeletal examination, and DNA testing. With only a dozen or so bones to work with, Dr. Bass examined the skull and was able to see that the skull was small in size and scrawny. It also did not have the heavy brow ridges or muscle markings that normally characterize a male. He saw that the eye holes were sharp and the occipital bone was non-existent at the base of the skull, which would indicate a male. These were the first indications that they were on the right track. There was something that was not making sense, though. Leoma was supposed to have been hit in the head with a tire iron, and if that were the case, she would have had a fracture in her skull. There was no fracture. They would have to use DNA testing to further determine if this was Leoma. With most of the bones decayed, the sample of DNA would have to come from her teeth and one large fibula. The results came back 4 months later, had been compared to a DNA sample from Leoma's daughters, and were determined that the woman in the grave was not Leoma Patterson. After reading the report further, after a few months, Dr. Bass started questioning the results of the test due to the testing was done on a piece of bone, not on the teeth where the DNA would have been best preserved. He had several procedures done to help further his suspicions, including superimposition of her photo over the skull and facial reconstruction over the skull with clay. With no definite answer, he had to go back to DNA testing. Dr. Bass sent the 2 teeth to Texas to a former student of his working in a similar field, and after 7 tries, he was still not able to come up with enough DNA to positively match the samples from her children. He soon figured out the teeth, along with the rest of the bones, had been soaked in detergent and bleach when originally examined, and that process had destroyed most of the DNA. When Dr. Bass was about to tell the family of the former UT student, he received a phone call from the sheriff of the county where the body was found, explaining he had found a hair and dry scalp piece in the evidence file for this case. After obtaining the hair and scalp piece, he was able to have it tested, and it was determined that the hair and scalp piece were in fact a match to Leoma Patterson and her 2 daughters' samples. These 2 cases were so different. One was of piecing bodies back together, and the other trying to find enough pieces of a body to determine identity. The biological technologies used were many and consisted of the 4-disc program, which is a program used worldwide to help establish race and sex of skeletal remains. Also used were clay facial recognition, superimposition, the facial reconstruction system, and testing of mDNA. These are just a few examples of the technology available to help forensic pathologists solve cases no matter what the nature may be. Forensic entomology, the study of insects in postmortem, is another tool that can be used to help point to the time of someone's murder or death. Blowflies are all the buzz about finding evidence in insect and postmortem activity. This traditional tool goes back 8 centuries, with more advancement being made in the last 50 years. A blowfly will swarm to blood, and the easiest way to get to it on the human body is by flying into open orifices, such as ears, nose, mouth, eyes, or an open wound. From there, the female lay eggs so that the young have food to feast on when born. Within 24 hours, the maggots are born, and 10 to 12 days later, cocoons turn themselves into puparia. The metamorphosis turns out a fully adult winged blowfly. The total 14-day count of this cycle can be a day less or more depending on the weather. By collecting and examining the larva and puparia off of the corpse, it is possible for a forensic entomologist to determine time of death. The impact Dr. Bass's research has had on the forensic field has been astronomical. It has helped to start other body farms at universities across the world and been instrumental in solving crimes of all types. He has helped federal, local, and foreign authorities in the identification of cold cases and murder mysteries. Law enforcement officers are able to learn the basics of decay and test theories on the science of death at the farm Bass built. Mass graves are also something they are able to study. People from all over the world have donated their bodies upon their deaths to help further the research on the farm. It is fair to say that Dr. Bill Bass and his associates have helped to revolutionize the forensics world. My impression of this book is that it was a great read. It was very educational in the fact that it helped someone like me with no previous knowledge of forensics to understand the process of how to determine the length of time a body has been deceased. It also helped me to understand the processes and techniques available to forensic pathologists. I was disappointed to learn that it was a fictional book, but I do believe that some aspects of it were true. The stories kept me involved in the reading, but I can say I felt like there was too much background information on some of the cases. I think I was just hungry, for lack of a better word, for more unsolved mysteries.